The afternoon sun reflected off the massive windows of the office on Wall Street, where Ethan Montgomery observed the city his father had helped build. At 32, he was the perfect example of what it meant to be an heir to high society in America. Educated at the world's best universities, director of one of the country's largest real estate development companies, and possessing a beauty he made sure to exploit at every social event he attended. So, do you accept the challenge? The voice of Ryan, his best friend since high school, broke the silence of the office. Ethan swiveled his Italian leather chair, facing the three friends occupying the exclusive designer sofa. "I don't know. Seems a bit childish, doesn't it?" he replied, twirling the whiskey glass between his fingers. But his smirk betrayed that he was already interested in the proposal. "Childish? Since when do you care about that?" provoked Peter, the youngest of the group. "Or is the great Ethan Montgomery losing his touch?" Laughter echoed through the office. Ethan knew this game well. He had grown up amid challenges and provocations in a world where every move was calculated, every gesture had a purpose. His father, Robert Montgomery, had built an empire, but it was his mother, Barbara, who had ensured that the family name became synonymous with power and influence in New York high society. "Show me the target," he finally said, giving in to curiosity. Ryan smiled, taking out his phone and showing a woman's Instagram profile. "Olivia Fields," he presented. "She has a fashion atelier in Brooklyn. Nothing too impressive yet, but they say she has talent. The interesting thing is that she refused 3 invitations to important events in our circle. Seems she doesn't identify with our lifestyle." Ethan observed the photo carefully. Olivia was different from the women he usually dated. Without filters or studied poses, she smiled naturally in front of her atelier. Her curly hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her generous curves were evident even through the simple dress she wore. "The challenge is this," Ryan continued. "You have 3 months to make her fall in love. Then at your mother's winter ball, you humiliate her publicly. Show her that people like us don't mix with, well, people like her." A heavy silence settled in the office. For a brief moment, something inside Ethan hesitated, but years of social conditioning spoke louder. "3 months is too long," he replied with an arrogant smile. "Give me 2. The laughter and provocations continued as they decided on the terms of the bet. No one there perceived the cruelty of what they were planning. For them, it was just another game, just another way to pass the time in their privileged lives. The next morning, Ethan already had a plan. His assistant had discovered that Olivia was looking for a larger space for her atelier. Coincidentally, one of Montgomery Development's properties was exactly in the area she was looking for. It would be the perfect pretext for a first meeting. Adjusting his Armani suit in the elevator mirror, he rehearsed his best smile. This would be an easy conquest, he thought. Just another one for his collection of stories to tell at Friday dinners with friends. Little did he know, he was about to embark on the biggest transformation of his life. As he drove his Porsche towards Brooklyn, Ethan couldn't imagine that. This bet would completely change his worldview. That this woman, whom he saw only as a challenge, would be able to dismantle all his certainties. And that for the first time in his privileged life, he would learn the true meaning of the word love. Olivia's atelier was exactly as Ethan had imagined, small, cozy, and with personality. Mannequins wearing original creations occupied every available corner, and colorful fabrics were spread over a large work table. What he didn't expect was the energy of the place, so different from the aseptic and calculated environments he was used to. "Can I help you?" The firm voice surprised him. Olivia emerged from behind a screen, carrying an unfinished piece. Her brown eyes studied him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Ethan activated his rehearsed smile, the one that never failed. "Miss Fields, I'm Ethan Montgomery, from Montgomery Development." He extended his hand, noticing the small calluses on her fingers, marks of someone who really worked. "I heard you're looking for a larger space." Olivia raised an eyebrow, putting the piece on the table. "And how exactly did you know that, Mr. Montgomery?" "Please, call me Ethan," he replied, maintaining his smile. "Let's say I have good contacts in the real estate market. Actually, I have a proposal that might interest you." "Of course you do," she murmured, starting to organize some fabrics. "Look, Mr. Montgomery, Ethan, I appreciate the interest, but I don't need favors from the New York elite. If I get a bigger space, it will be on my own merit." The response caught him off guard. Women didn't usually resist his charms, much less dismiss his offers of help. "It's not a favor, it's business," he insisted, genuinely intrigued by her reaction. "How about we discuss it over lunch?" Olivia stopped what she was doing and looked at him directly. "Listen, I know who you are. I've seen your photos in the social columns, always surrounded by models and socialites. If you're looking for another conquest for your collection, I'm sorry, but you've wasted your time." For the first time in years, Ethan felt disarmed, not by what she said, but by the raw honesty in her words. There were no games here, no subterfuges. It was refreshing and at the same time disconcerting. "Actually," he found himself saying, "I was more interested in seeing your creations. That dress in the window. It's different from anything I've ever seen." Olivia's face lit up for a moment, and Ethan realized he had found an opening. "It's inspired by the lace makers of the South," she explained, walking to the piece. "Each detail tells a story, you know. It's not just about appearance, it's about meaning." For a whole hour, Olivia talked about her work, about how she learned to sew from her grandmother, about her inspirations in American folk cultures, about her dream of creating fashion that represented the true diversity of the country. Ethan found himself genuinely interested, asking questions, noticing details he would normally ignore. "Sorry," she finally said, realizing how much time had passed. "I got carried away." "No need to apologize," he replied, surprised by his own sincerity. "It was interesting." Olivia smiled, and for the first time, there was no distrust in her gaze. "Still about lunch and the space, and I appreciate it, but I have to decline." Ethan nodded, but he wasn't ready to give up. "How about coffee? No business proposals, I promise. Just a conversation about fashion and American culture. I confess you made me realize how much I don't know about the subject." She hesitated, studying his face as if looking for signs of falsehood. "Just coffee," she finally agreed, "and you'll have to endure more stories about lace makers and weavers." "I can't wait," he replied, and was surprised to realize it was true. Leaving the atelier, Ethan checked the messages on his phone. There were several from his friends asking about the progress of the bet. For the first time, he felt uncomfortable, thinking about the challenge. There was something about Olivia, an authenticity that intrigued him, but he quickly pushed that thought away. It was just another game, he repeated to himself, just another conquest. Little did he know that coffee would change everything, that every story about lace makers and every sincere smile would begin to dismantle piece by piece the armor he had built over years, and that soon the player would find himself trapped in his own game. One coffee turned into two, then into lunches, and before Ethan realized, he had been spending every free moment with Olivia for 3 weeks. The small atelier in Brooklyn had become his favorite refuge, a place where the pressures and expectations of high society seemed distant. "You're holding the needle wrong," Olivia laughed, watching his clumsy attempts to sew a button. It was a Saturday afternoon, and instead of being at the yacht club with friends, Ethan was here, sitting on a simple stool, trying to learn something he never imagined doing. "How can someone hold a needle wrong?" he protested, but he was smiling. "It only has 2 sides. 3 weeks visiting me and you still haven't learned anything?" Olivia teased, approaching to help. Her soft perfume of wildflowers invaded Ethan's senses. "Here, let me show you." Their hands touched when she adjusted the position of his fingers, and Ethan felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the mild temperature of that autumn afternoon. Olivia had that effect on him. Every little touch, every sincere smile seemed to awaken sensations he had never experienced before. "You know what intrigues me most about you?" she asked, returning to her own work. "How someone who grew up with so much privilege can be so curious about simple things." Ethan paused, reflecting on the observation. "Maybe because no one ever showed me the value of these simple things," he replied, with an honesty that surprised him. "In my world, Everything is about appearances, status, power. Here it's different. Olivia observed him for a moment, as if trying to decipher something in his expression. And which world do you prefer? The question hung in the air, loaded with meanings that Ethan wasn't ready to face yet. His phone vibrated, saving him from answering. It was a message from Ryan. "Hey, champ, has the fatty fallen for your charm yet? Don't forget there are only 5 weeks left till the ball." Ethan's stomach twisted. In recent days, he had managed to ignore the real reason for his approach to Olivia. The bet, which before seemed like a fun game, now weighed on his conscience like lead. "Everything okay?" Olivia asked, noticing his change in mood. "Just work," he lied, putting away the phone. "Hey, how about we go out tonight? I know a place you'll love." Olivia raised an eyebrow, suspicious. "If it's another one of those fancy restaurants—" "No, nothing like that," he assured, "and trust me." Hours later, they were sitting at a simple table in a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy. Ethan had discovered the place by chance, researching places Olivia might like. The owner, an Italian gentleman over 70, still made fresh pasta every day, and the recipes were the same for 3 generations. "I can't believe you know this place," Olivia commented, savoring her ravioli. "I thought you only frequented starred restaurants." "I didn't know it either," he admitted. "Actually, I've been discovering many things in the last few weeks." The look they exchanged was intense, loaded with something that went beyond simple attraction. Olivia had the power to make him question everything he had always believed in, and the scariest thing was that he didn't want to resist this change. "You know," she began, playing with the napkin, "when you first showed up at the atelier, I thought you were just another playboy trying to show off. But you're different from what you appear to be, Ethan Montgomery." "Different how?" he asked, genuinely curious. "You have something genuine hidden under all that arrogant air pose, something that maybe even you don't know yet." Her words hit him like a punch. Olivia could see through his masks with disconcerting ease, and for the first time in his life, Ethan found himself wanting to be the person she saw in him. The night progressed between conversations and laughter. When he accompanied her home to a small apartment in Park Slope, Ethan felt the almost irresistible urge to kiss her, but something stopped him. Not pride or fear of what his friends would say, but the fear that if he kissed her now, he would be staining something pure with the dirt of his lie. "Thank you for the evening," Olivia smiled, already at the door. "It was surprising." "Like you," he replied, and for the first time in his life, a compliment came out without ulterior motives. Driving back home in his Porsche, Ethan found himself thinking about how his life had changed in just 3 weeks. The imported car, which was once a source of pride, now seemed just an empty object. The parties and events that filled his social calendar had lost their shine. And Olivia had become much more than a challenge. His phone vibrated again with more messages from friends about the bet, but he couldn't look. Guilt, a sensation hitherto unknown to Ethan Montgomery, began to gnaw at his chest, and for the first time, he wondered if the price of winning this game would be too high. The Montgomery mansion in the Upper East Side was silent that Sunday morning except for the tinkling of silver cutlery against French porcelain during the family's weekly brunch. Barbara Montgomery observed her son with eagle eyes as he played distractedly with the food on his plate. "Ethan, darling," her voice cut through the silence like crystal, "you've been very absent lately. Marina Rothschild asked about you at the last charity event." He raised his eyes from the plate, meeting his mother's penetrating gaze. Barbara, with her impeccably styled hair and perfectly aligned pearls, was the embodiment of New York aristocracy. "I've been busy with some personal projects," he replied vaguely, thinking of Olivia and the afternoons he spent in her atelier. "Projects?" Barbara arched a perfectly delineated eyebrow. "What kind of projects make you frequent Brooklyn so assiduously?" Ethan's fork stopped in mid-air. He should have imagined that his mother would already be aware of his movements. Nothing escaped her network of informants in high society. "How did you—" "Please, darling," she interrupted him with an icy smile. "Did you really think I wouldn't know about your visits to a seamstress?" The last word came out as if it was something unpleasant in her mouth. Olivia is a talented designer. Ethan found himself defending her before he could contain himself. Her creations are unique. Ah, so now you're a fashion expert? Barbara laughed without humor. Ethan, you're a Montgomery. We have a reputation to uphold. You can't be seen fraternizing with just anyone who doesn't belong to our circle, he completed, feeling a growing irritation. And who decides who belongs or not, Mother? Society decides, darling. It's always been that way. She gently set down her cutlery. I know sometimes you like to have fun with different people, but there are limits. What are your friends thinking? The mention of friends made his stomach churn. The bet, which had started as a cruel game, now haunted him. How to explain to his mother that Olivia had changed something inside him, that for the first time he was meeting real people, with real dreams and struggles? I don't care what they're thinking, he replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Barbara narrowed her eyes, studying her son as if seeing him for the first time. You've always been my pride, Ethan. You've always known your place, always understood your responsibilities to the name you carry. Don't disappoint me now. And what if I want more than just carrying a name? The words escaped before he could contain them. A heavy silence fell over the table. Barbara placed the linen napkin on the table with studied calm. More? You have everything, my son. Money, power, respect. What else could this girl offer you besides problems? Authenticity, he replied simply. Something you can't buy with all the Montgomery money. Barbara's face hardened. Enough of this nonsense. I'll arrange a dinner next week. Marina will be present, as well as other appropriate young women from our society. You will attend. It wasn't a request. It was an order. Like all the orders Barbara Montgomery had given throughout her life, always aiming to keep the family at the top of the social pyramid. I'm sorry, Mother. I have other plans. Getting up from the table, Ethan felt the weight of his mother's gaze on his back. He knew that conversation would have consequences, but for the first time he didn't care. He took out his phone and typed a message to Olivia. I need to see you. As he drove towards Brooklyn, conflicting thoughts invaded his mind. On one side, the weight of family expectations, social pressure, the bet with friends that now seemed like a distant nightmare. On the other, the true simplicity of Olivia, her sincere smile, the way she made him want to be a better person. His phone rang several times, messages from Ryan and the others asking about the progress of the bet, reminding that the ball was approaching. Ethan ignored them all. At that moment, he could only think of one thing: how to tell Olivia the truth before it was too late. What Ethan didn't know was that Beatrice Montgomery would never accept defeat so easily. In her office at the mansion, she was already planning her next moves. The Montgomery name would not be tarnished by her son's whim, not while she was alive. To prevent it. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled Olivia's small apartment as rain fell outside. It was one of those lazy Sunday afternoons when time seemed to drag on more slowly. Ethan was sitting on the simple living room couch, watching Olivia work on a new dress, completely absorbed in her creative process. Do you have any idea how beautiful you look when you're concentrating? He asked, breaking the comfortable silence. That had settled between them. Olivia looked up from the fabric, a smile playing on her lips. And do you have any idea how much you've changed in the last few weeks? The Ethan I met would never be satisfied spending an entire Sunday watching someone sew. She was right. His Sundays used to be filled with endless brunches, parties in luxurious penthouses, and empty conversations about investments and high society gossip. Now none of that seemed important. Maybe I needed to meet the right person to discover what really matters, he replied, getting up to move closer to her. Ethan's phone vibrated for the 10th time that afternoon. It was Ryan again. Dude, your mum is asking about you at the charity lunch. Marina keeps looking at the door. This is gonna blow up. Ethan ignored the message, as he had been doing for the past few weeks. It was getting harder and harder to deal with the guilt he felt. The bet, which once seemed like an innocent game, now weighed on his conscience like lead. Did something happen? Olivia asked, noticing his change in mood. You've been worried lately. It's complicated, he replied, running his hand through his hair. My mother. She doesn't understand my recent choices. Olivia put down the fabric she was working on and approached him. You never talk much about your family. What are they really like? Ethan hesitated. How could he explain the complexity of relationships in his family? How to describe a mother who measured people's worth by their bank balance and an absent father who had turned his son into just another of his investments? My mother is traditional, he began, choosing his words carefully. She has a very specific view of how things should be, of who we should associate with. And I don't fit into that view, Olivia completed without beating around the bush. It's not you, he hurried to say. It's her world that's too small. I didn't realize it before, but after I met you... After you met me, she encouraged, her eyes fixed on his. Ethan felt his heart race. How could he tell her that she had awakened something in him that he didn't even know existed, that every moment together made him question everything he had always believed? After I met you, I realized that I've spent my entire life following a script written by other people, he confessed. You make me want to write my own story. Olivia's smile lit up the whole room. She moved closer, touching his face gently. And what story do you want to write, Ethan Montgomery? Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Olivia went to answer it, returning a few minutes later with a puzzled expression and an envelope in her hands. It's for you, she said, handing over the envelope of fine, textured paper. Ethan immediately recognized the Montgomery coat of arms embossed in gold relief. His heart froze as he opened the elegant invitation. Beatrice Montgomery is pleased to invite Miss Olivia Fields to an intimate dinner at her residence next Thursday. Your mother is inviting me to dinner, Olivia asked, surprised. I thought she didn't approve of our relationship. Ethan knew his mother too well to believe that this invitation was a gesture of acceptance. Beatrice Montgomery never did anything without a calculated purpose. You don't have to go, he said quickly. My mother can be intimidating. And that's why I should go, Olivia replied with determination. I'm not going to hide as if I have something to hide. If she wants to meet me, great. I'll show her exactly who I am. Her courage impressed and scared him at the same time. Olivia had no idea what she was about to face, and Ethan, for the first time, felt real fear, not of his mother's manipulations or society's judgment, but of losing the only person who made him feel truly alive. Then I'll be by your side, he promised, pulling her into a hug. But as he hugged her, the weight of the initial lie, of the cruel bet he had made with his friends, seemed to suck all the air from his lungs. Time was running out. The winter ball was approaching, and with it the final deadline for the bet. Ethan knew he needed to tell Olivia the truth before it was too late. But how to do it without losing the only person who made him want to be better? The Montgomery mansion gleamed in the New York night, its lights reflecting in the ornamental fountain of the impeccably maintained garden. Olivia took a deep breath before climbing the marble steps, wearing a dress she had created herself, an emerald green satin model that accentuated her curves without ostentation. You look beautiful, Ethan whispered, gently squeezing her hand. He could feel the slight tremor in her fingers, although her face maintained an admirable serenity. The massive oak double door was opened by one of the uniformed maids, revealing an entrance hall that looked like it came straight out of a European palace. Beatrice Montgomery waited at the foot of the main staircase, wearing a Chanel suit and her usual pearl necklace. Welcome to our home, dear, her melodious voice echoed through the environment, but her eyes remained cold as ice. What an interesting dress. Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery, Olivia replied with a polite smile. I created it myself, inspired by the colors of the winter garden I saw in the photos from your last charity reception in the magazine. Beatrice raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the reference. Oh, you follow the society columns? I follow everything related to fashion and important events in the city. It's part of my job as a designer to be well informed. A tense silence settled in, broken only when Robert Montgomery, Ethan's father, came down the stairs. Sorry for the delay, a video conference with Asian investors, he explained automatically, barely raising his eyes from his cell phone. Dinner was served in the main dining room, where an antique mahogany table easily seated 20 people, although there were only 4 of them. The silverware gleamed under the crystal chandelier. and every detail of the decor screamed power and tradition. "So, Olivia," Beatrice began as the soup was served, "tell us about your little shop. It must be gratifying to work with something." "So's artisanal. Actually, Mrs. Montgomery, it's a studio," Olivia corrected gently. "And yes, it's extremely gratifying to see my creations come to life and gain meaning. Each piece tells a story, carries a part of our culture." "Culture?" Beatrice laughed delicately. "How lovely. But surely you dream of something bigger, don't you? Perhaps a partnership with an established brand?" "My dream is to build my own brand," Olivia replied firmly. "One that represents true American diversity, not just imported standards." "Fascinating." Beatrice's tone was almost condescending. "Ethan, darling, did you know that Marina Rothschild just got back from Paris? She looks simply stunning. Her father mentioned a possible merger between our companies." "Mom," Ethan interrupted, his voice tense. "I'm not interested in Marina or corporate mergers right now." "No?" Beatrice smiled, her eyes fixed on Olivia. "And where are your interests lately, son? In alternative projects?" Olivia maintained her composure, although her hands slightly tightened the napkin under the table. "Mrs. Montgomery, I noticed you're wearing Chanel. Did you know that Coco Chanel started as a simple milliner? She revolutionized fashion precisely by daring to challenge established standards." "What a peculiar comparison," Beatrice replied, her smile faltering slightly. "But you see, dear, Gabrielle Chanel had exceptional talent." "Like Olivia," Ethan intervened. "You should see her creations, Mom. They're unique." "Unique is exactly the word I was looking for," Beatrice smiled, gesturing for the main course to be served. "You know, Olivia, we Montgomerys have a long tradition of supporting the arts. Perhaps we could help your little business. With some conditions, of course." Olivia gently put down her cutlery. "What kind of conditions?" "Oh, nothing major. Just some adjustments to your aesthetic line, and maybe to your personal presentation. After all, a brand needs to have a certain standard." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan felt his heart race, torn between anger at his mother's insinuation and fear of Olivia's reaction. "Mrs. Montgomery," Olivia began, her voice calm but firm. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid you haven't understood the purpose of my work. I'm not interested in conforming to standards that I consider limiting and exclusionary." "Don't be foolish, dear," Beatrice cut in, her smile now completely absent. "If you intend to maintain any kind of relationship with my son, you'll need to understand certain realities. Our social position requires—" "The only reality I need to understand," Olivia interrupted her, standing up with dignity, "is that some values are not for sale, not for all the Montgomery money." Ethan watched, paralyzed, as Olivia placed the napkin on the table. His heart screamed for him to do something, say something, but the words seemed stuck in his throat. "It was a pleasure to meet you," Olivia said, heading for the door. "And Mrs. Montgomery? That pearl necklace would look much more elegant if you wore it with less arrogance." After her departure, the silence in the dining room was palpable. Beatrice Montgomery was livid, her hands trembling slightly as she held her wineglass. "Well," she finally said, "I hope this ends that little adventure of yours, Ethan. Now we can get back to reality." But Ethan was no longer listening. His world, which had always been so black and white, was now full of colors, colors that Olivia had brought into his life. And for the first time he understood that he needed to make a choice, continue being the son his parents had molded, or become the man that Olivia made him want to be. He abruptly got up from the table, ignoring his mother's protests. He needed to find Olivia. He needed to explain. But explain what? The truth about the bet still weighed on his chest like lead, and time was running out quickly. Ethan's penthouse in Manhattan, usually his haven of luxury and comfort, felt suffocating that night. After 3 days of being unable to reach Olivia, who wasn't answering his calls or responding to his messages, he felt adrift. The whiskey in his glass remained untouched as he watched the city lights through the panoramic window. "Man, you've got to snap out of it." Ryan's voice echoed through the room. He and Peter had shown up unannounced, concerned about their friend's disappearance. The ball is in 2 weeks. This story has gone too far already. Ethan remained silent, his thoughts fixed on how Olivia had left his parents' mansion that night. The dignity in her gaze, the strength in her words. She was everything his world wasn't. Authentic, genuine, real. "You know what I think?" Peter chimed in, helping himself to some whiskey. "You're taking this bet way too seriously. It was supposed to be fun, remember?" "Fun?" Ethan finally turned, his voice laden with bitterness. "Playing with someone's feelings is fun for you guys." Ryan and Peter exchanged concerned looks. They had never seen their friend like this, questioning the behavior that had always been natural in their social circle. "Don't tell me you—" Ryan began, incredulous. "Dude, you can't be in love with her. It's Olivia, a seamstress from Brooklyn." "So what?" Ethan exploded, slamming his glass on the table. "What's wrong with her? Because she's from Brooklyn? Because she works with her own hands? Because she has more talent and dignity than all of us put together?" A heavy silence fell over the room. Peter was the first to break it. "Your mum's gonna have a fit." "My mum?" Ethan laughed humorlessly. "My mum already showed exactly who she is at the dinner. You know what she did? She offered to help Olivia as long as she changed her appearance. Her style, basically everything she is." "And what's the problem?" Ryan shrugged. "It'd be good for her, wouldn't it? An opportunity to move up in the world." Ethan stared at his friends as if seeing them for the first time. Were these the people he had shared his life with? Was this the world he belonged to? "Olivia doesn't need to move up in the world," he replied firmly. "She's already at the top. It's just a different top from ours, one that's achieved through work, talent, and integrity." "Okay, now you're scaring me," Ryan approached, putting his hand on his friend's shoulder. "Listen, the bet is still on. The ball is coming. Your mom is already telling everyone that you and Marina—" "Enough!" Ethan shrugged off abruptly. "There's not going to be any bet." "What do you mean there's not going to be any bet?" Peter protested. "You can't back out now." "I can, and I will. And you guys—" He faced his friends with determination. "You're going to keep your mouths shut about this?" Ryan crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "And if we don't?" The veiled threat hung in the air. Ethan felt the weight of years of friendship, social conventions, and family expectations on his shoulders. But he also felt something new, the certainty that he was doing the right thing for the first time in his life. "Then I'll tell Olivia everything myself," he declared. "I'd rather lose her knowing I was honest than keep her through a lie." "You've lost your mind," Peter exclaimed. "Think about the scandal, your family. What everyone will say." "I don't care anymore what they'll say," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "For the first time in my life, I care about what I feel." Ryan grabbed his coat, heading for the door. "You're going to regret this, man. This isn't you." "No," Ethan agreed. "This isn't the old me. And thanks to Olivia, it never will be again." After his friends left, Ethan remained alone in the penthouse, facing the reflection of his choices. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his mother reminding him about the ball and mentioning that Marina would be there. Next to it, a notification from an online fashion magazine caught his attention. Olivia would be one of the finalists in an important new designers contest. His heart clenched. She was realizing her dreams, conquering her space on her own merit, while he was still hiding behind lies and social games. The truth needed to be told, but how? How to tell the only person who made him believe in true love that everything had started with a cruel bet? Grabbing his car keys, Ethan made his decision. No matter the cost, no matter the consequences, Olivia deserved to know the truth. And if that meant losing her, well, maybe that was the punishment he deserved for having played with something as precious as love. The studio was quiet when Ethan arrived, except for the soft sound of the sewing machine. Through the shop window, he could see Olivia working intently on a piece, her hair casually tied up, some loose strands framing her face. The sight made his heart ache. She looked so at peace, so genuine in her element. And he was about to destroy everything. "We need to talk," he said as soon as he entered, his voice betraying the nervousness he felt. Olivia looked up from the fabric, her face assuming a neutral expression. "Not now, Ethan. I'm busy. The contest is in 3 days, and I need to finish this collection." "Please," he insisted, approaching. It's important, she sighed, setting aside her sewing. If it's about the dinner with your mother, you don't need to explain anything. It was actually good that it happened. It opened my eyes to a lot of things. It's not about the dinner. I mean, not exactly. He ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture that Olivia knew well by now. It's about how everything started, about the reason I showed up here the first time. What do you mean? She frowned, something in his tone of voice setting off an alarm. At that moment, the studio door opened. Ryan walked in, followed by Peter and, to everyone's surprise, Marina Rothschild. The smile on Ryan's face made Ethan's blood run cold. Aren't you going to tell her, Ethan? Ryan taunted, his tone full of malice. About the bet? Olivia slowly stood up, her eyes moving from one face to another. What bet? Ryan, don't... Ethan tried to intervene, but it was too late. The bet we made, Ryan continued, ignoring his friend's desperate look. Ethan had 2 months to win you over, and then publicly humiliate you at the Winter Ball. You know how it is. Prove that people like you will never fit into our world. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia remained motionless, her face a mask of disbelief that slowly transformed into understanding. That's why you showed up here that day. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's why all the sudden interest in my work, the constant visits. No. Ethan approached, trying to touch her arm, but she recoiled. At first, yes, but then what? She cut him off, her voice now laden with contained anger. Then you realized I was a real person? That I had feelings? That I didn't deserve to be treated like a toy for your rich friends? Marina laughed, a shrill and unpleasant sound. Darling, don't be so dramatic. It was just a joke. A joke? Olivia repeated, her eyes fixed on Ethan. My life, my feelings. All of this was a joke. To you? Olivia, please, Ethan pleaded. Let me explain. I came here to tell you everything, to tell you that you really fell in love, she completed, with a bitter laugh. That you discovered the fat girl from Brooklyn had a heart, that she was capable of making you feel something other than contempt. Tears shone in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them that pleasure. You know what's worse? She continued, her voice trembling slightly. I really believed. I believed that you were different, that you had seen beyond appearances, beyond social classes. What an idiot I was. You weren't an idiot, Ethan tried again, his own heart breaking. What I feel for you is real. Everything changed when I truly got to know you. Real? She picked up one of the pieces she was sewing, one she had started, to make thinking of him. You know what's real, Ethan? This is real, she pointed to her work. My sweat, my effort, my creations. The rest was all an illusion. Ryan took a step forward, his smile even more cruel. Come on, Olivia, don't be so hard on Ethan. He was just following the social game. That's how it works in our world. Your world, she corrected, straightening her shoulders. A world so small that it needs to belittle others to feel big. Turning to Ethan, her gaze was one of pure disappointment. You know what's ironic? Your mother was right. I really don't belong in your world, but not for the reasons she thinks. I don't belong because I have something you'll never have, dignity. Grabbing her purse, Olivia walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned one last time. The contest is in 3 days. Don't show up there, don't look for me anymore, go back. To your world of bets and social games, Ethan. That's where you belong. The sound of the door closing echoed through the studio like a gunshot. Ryan and the others laughed, satisfied with the spectacle they had provided. But Ethan barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on the unfinished dress on the work table, a dress that told a love story that was now destroyed. And for the first time in his privileged life, Ethan Montgomery felt the true weight of his choices. It wasn't just Olivia who was lost. It was the better person he could have become beside her. The days that followed the revelation of the bet were the darkest in Ethan Montgomery's life. His luxurious penthouse, once a symbol of status and power, now felt like a golden prison. Messages and calls from Olivia remained unanswered, and each attempt to visit her at the studio was met with closed doors. In his office at Montgomery Enterprises, piles of documents awaited his signature, but he could barely concentrate. Olivia's Words echoed constantly in his mind. Go back to your world of bets and social games. That's where you belong. Son, Beatrice's voice cut through his thoughts as she entered his office without ceremony. Enough of this self-pity. The ball is tomorrow, and you need to pull yourself together. Marina will be there. All the important families will be present. I'm not going to the ball, Mom, Ethan replied, his voice firm. Beatrice narrowed her eyes, resting her hands on the mahogany desk. Of course you are. It's your obligation, as a Montgomery. This story with that seamstress has gone far enough. That seamstress, he stood up facing his mother, has a name, Olivia, and she's more genuine than anyone in this world of appearances we live in. Please, Ethan, Beatrice laughed humorlessly. What happened to you? Where's my son who understood his place, his responsibilities? He grew up, Mom, finally grew up. Walking to the window, Ethan observed the city stretched out below. Somewhere out there, Olivia was preparing her collection for the contest, fighting for her dreams without needing to step on anyone to achieve them. You know, he continued, I've spent my entire life trying to be the perfect son, the perfect heir, following your rules, your standards, and for what? To become someone who plays with others' feelings, who thinks it's normal to humiliate people just because they're different. Don't be dramatic, Beatrice cut in. That girl would never be suitable for our family. You just wanted to protect me, he completed, turning to face her. No, Mum, you wanted to control, like you always have. But this time you went too far. Grabbing his briefcase, Ethan walked to the door. Beatrice followed him with her gaze, her mask of control beginning to crack. Where are you going? To do the right thing for the first time in my life. In the elevator, Ethan made a call he should have made long ago. Mr. Mendez, this is Ethan Montgomery. Remember that building in Brooklyn you wanted to sell? Is it still available? The next few hours were a whirlwind. Meetings with lawyers, documents signed, plans drawn up. When he finally got home, it was past midnight. On his bed, the invitation to the Montgomery Ball gleamed with its pretentious gold lettering. Tomorrow would be the big day, not because of the ball, but because of Olivia's contest. She had worked so hard for that moment, dreamed so much of that opportunity. And he had to find a way to fix everything he had broken. His phone rang. It was Ryan. Hey man, tomorrow's the big day. Everyone's waiting for the show at the ball. You're not going to... Ethan hung up without answering. Taking the ball invitation, he tore it to pieces. His hands were shaking, but his decision was made. In his closet, he ran his fingers over the Italian suits, silk ties, handmade shoes, symbols of a world that now seemed so empty to him. In the back of a drawer, he found what he was looking for, the button that Olivia had taught him to sew that afternoon in the studio. A small object that carried more meaning than all his luxurious possessions. Forgive me, Olivia, he whispered to the silence of his apartment. I didn't know who I was until I met you, and now that I know, I can't go back to who I was. The sun was beginning to rise when Ethan finally finished organizing everything. The documents were ready, the decisions made. Looking at himself in the mirror, he no longer saw the Montgomery heir, the high society playboy. He saw only a man trying for the first time to do the right thing. The contest would begin in a few hours. Olivia would present her collection, the work of her life, and he had a plan that could cost him everything he had ever known, but that just might give him the only thing that really mattered, a chance to prove that true love is stronger than any social game. The New York Fashion Institute buzzed with activity that night. The new talents in American fashion contest had attracted the cream of the fashion market, and the buzz of expectation filled the air. Backstage, Olivia was putting the final touches on her collection, her hands slightly trembling as she adjusted one of the pieces. 5 minutes, someone announced. Taking a deep breath, she looked at her collection one last time. Each piece told a story, not just hers, but that of all women who didn't fit into the standards imposed by society. It was her declaration of independence, her proof that talent and authenticity were worth more than name or social position. In the auditorium, to her surprise, Beatrice Montgomery occupied a seat in the front row, next to Marina Rothschild and other members of New York's Elite. Olivia felt a tightness in her chest but remained firm. She wouldn't let them intimidate her. Not anymore. The show began. One by one, her models walked down the runway, showcasing creations that blended elements of American culture with a modern and inclusive vision of fashion. The audience reacted with approving murmurs, especially when a plus-size model strutted down the catwalk in an evening gown that elegantly accentuated her curves. That's when she saw him. Ethan was standing at the back of the auditorium, not wearing his usual Italian suit but a simple shirt and dress pants. His eyes never left the runway, and his expression was one of pure admiration. Before Olivia could process his presence, the announcer took the microphone to announce the winners. The third place was called, then the second. When the moment for first place arrived, the silence was palpable, and the grand prize of the New Talents in American Fashion Contest goes to Olivia Fields. The explosion of applause was deafening. Olivia took the stage on shaky legs, hardly believing what was happening, but before she could give her acceptance speech, a familiar voice resonated through the auditorium. "Excuse me." Ethan had taken the microphone. The murmur in the audience increased, especially when Beatrice Montgomery stood up, her face a mask of contained fury. "Ethan, don't you dare," she began, but he ignored her. "Olivia," he continued, his voice firm, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, not even your attention, but before you leave this stage, I need everyone here to know something." Silence fell over the auditorium. Olivia remained motionless, her heart beating out of rhythm. 2 months. Ago I made a cruel bet. I promised to win over and humiliate a woman just because she was different from my artificial world. But fate has an interesting sense of humor, because I was the one who ended up conquered. Conquered by her strength, her authenticity, her ability to see beauty where others see flaws. Murmurs ran through the audience. Beatrice Montgomery had sat down again, her face pale. "So today I didn't come here to ask for your forgiveness, Olivia. I came to redeem myself through actions, not words." He signaled, and a man in a suit approached with a folder. "This is Mr. Mendez, owner of the historic building on Bedford Avenue. The same building you always dreamed of turning into, your studio." Olivia held her breath, beginning to understand where he was going with this. "I sold my shares in Montgomery Enterprises," Ethan continued. "I used the money to buy the building. It's yours now, Olivia. No conditions, no games, no manipulations. Just a space for you to continue creating and inspiring people with your talent." The audience exploded in comments. Beatrice Montgomery abruptly stood up and left the auditorium, followed by Marina and other members of the elite. But Ethan continued, his eyes fixed on Olivia. "I know this doesn't erase what I did. Nothing can. But I wanted you to know that you changed my life, Olivia. You made me see that there's a world beyond appearances and social games, a world where what matters is who we are inside, not the last name we carry." Silent tears ran down Olivia's face, not of sadness or humiliation, but of an emotion she couldn't name. "You were right," he concluded, his voice softer. "I didn't deserve your love, but you taught me that true love isn't something you deserve. It's something that transforms us, that makes us want to be better people. And for that, even if you never forgive me, I'll be eternally grateful." The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia stepped forward, taking the microphone. "You know what the difference is between us, Ethan?" Her voice was calm, controlled. "When you hurt me, I decided not to become bitter. I decided to use that pain to create something beautiful, something that could inspire other people to believe in themselves." She paused, looking at her collection, at the models who represented different forms of beauty. "And now you've done the same. You've transformed your regret into action, your guilt into real change. That's something that old Ethan Montgomery would never do." Approaching him, Olivia continued, "I can't promise I'll forgive you immediately. Trust, once broken, needs time to be rebuilt. But I can promise that I'll give a chance, not to us, not yet, but to the person you're becoming." The smile that lit up Ethan's face was the most genuine of his life. It wasn't the practiced smile of the playboy, nor the arrogant smile of the heir. It was the smile of someone who had finally found his true self. That's all I ask," he replied softly. That night, while the Montgomery ball was happening in their sumptuous mansion, Olivia and Ethan walked the streets of Brooklyn. They stopped in front of the historic building that now belonged to her, its old windows reflecting the city lights. "And now?" she asked, looking at the future that was opening up before her. "Now," Ethan replied, "we write our own story. No bets, no games, no masks, just us being who we really are." Olivia's smile was her answer. Maybe love wasn't about deserving or not deserving. Maybe it was about growing, learning, and most importantly, having the courage to be true, to oneself and to others. And that night, under the starry New York sky, two worlds that seemed incompatible began, slowly, to intertwine into something new, something real, something truly valuable.